I think you actually answered your own question. I'm not sure that I could actually tell you what the business model was, and I was the COO. And that's actually one of the lessons that I think everybody has is that regardless, you need to understand business and business model. Health is a business. At the end of the day, health is a business. And even an individual practitioner who's a single shingle guy or gal it's a business. And you understand your rent, and you understand how many people you need to bring in, and you understand, all those types of elements, right? I think with Revolution, the real issue was the attempt to boil the ocean. And I can tell you numerous times walking into Steve's office and saying, that's great that you want to do that. That's a great idea. Now we're taking on 6 more competitors with market caps greater than $5 billion. Can we just pick one set of enemies? Because we're taking on all of them. And by the way, we're flipping the bird at every one of them, right? We're telling them all they don't know what they're doing. We're Revolution. And so, the reality is that there were some really good ideas there, some great ideas. Several of them have been written up in Clay Christensen's book. Some of them are still working through implementation. I'll give you 2 examples. One of them was guaranteed appointments. Doctor doesn't see you in 15 minutes, your copay's waived. Doctors would scream, well, I got to see a patient for a half hour. I don't know which one. And I'm like, it's called Q theory. We'll put somebody in your office for 2 weeks. We'll map every patient that comes through. We'll figure it out. We'll be able to, and by the way, you'll be able to market yourself with a little asterisk as being different from the other doctor because you have guaranteed appointments. Right, so some of the medical groups picked up on that, right? The other thing we did was we created, and this was fascinating. I worked with the federal government on this one, and a whole bunch, and I worked with, was a FICO score for health. Every individual in America gets a FICO score for health. And your premiums are aligned just like they are with your when you buy a homeowner's policy or a mortgage. So one of the things I did was I created a employer product that was the healthcare CPI plus 3, 5, or 9%. What's the number one of the fundamental issues? What's the number one issue that employers have with health? It's not cost. Because they know the cost. Yes, would they like it to be less? Of course they would. They can't predict it. So October comes around. When's planning season for an IBM? It was a year and a half ago. And all of a sudden, October of that next calendar year comes along, and the health plans come in and say it's a 23% rate increase this year. Forget the innovation, forget the R&D, forget the bonus, it just runs itself through. There's lack of predictability. So what if you could buy a 3 or 5 or 7 year lock-in? What if you could buy a plan, throw it on its head, what if you could buy a plan that was CPI plus 5? And therefore it was the healthcare CPI plus 5% every year for 7 years. Now, what you've done in exchange for that is you've given the health plan the right to change the network, toggle the benefits, do whatever they need to stay within that parameter, right? The reality is the health plan's now on your side because they're trying to manage to it. They know what assets they have at their fingertips to dial up or dial down. And if it's too draconian for you, you get the opportunity to opt out to the plus 9, right? But you would pay a slightly different premium for that, right? It takes the renewal process out, which is the stupidest thing that ever goes on in health, because midpoint to midpoint, actuarially, you can't figure out anything. And now I'm speaking healthcare talk that probably most of you don't get, but you do midpoint to midpoint pricing. You're sitting there looking at claims. It takes 2 to 3 years worth of actual claim data to really be on a track line. And most of the groups you've only had for a year, so you really are guessing like this on your price. Right? And you're doing it midpoint. It takes all that out, and you're now in a consistent flow of 3. So we created these things. So those things were embedded in there, like in ideas that were being developed, but we were taking on way too many things. We didn't, the reality at the end of the day was Steve really just wanted to be a consumer health portal. And the business of health as you know, I'm giving you the tip of the iceberg. Many of you in the room know deeper than I do in a lot of the specific areas. You got a guy running the company who's never been in health, who's basically, you know, been in the internet business. As we got into discussing, you know, lags and claim tables and everything, oh my God, his eyes would go like this. And he's, you know, he's not a dumb guy, you know. I mean, so that, I think that, you know, that's the, also be wary of where you are, right? And that's actually the advice I give to the guys at Everyday Health. I just keep reminding them, you're in the media business. Don't pretend to be in health. Don't get lost in that world. None of you have an MD.
And if you go in health business, I would add, so then have an ally who's going to explain you what you're doing actually on the healthcare side versus, it's not about technology. It's actually about health and figuring out the system.
Well, and it's about people.
Yeah.
How people interact and how people engage. I mean, there's a lot of neat ideas that people have thrust, but it's at the end, you know, it's at the end of the day, this is at the end of the day. Again, it's not only local. Each one of us is an individual who is unique. I mean, personalized medicine is one of those fascinating areas where I can't imagine where we're going with. And I was telling someone earlier. I mean, I'm participating in, have any of you seen 3D printers? So I was looking at, I actually saw pills being 3D printed the other day, right? The compounds are printed in the doctor's office, 3D printing. It was like, whoa, that could transform, you know, in an interesting way. That's a transformative thing. But then let's think through all the implications of that and who's actually doing it and how they're doing it and who's managing it and where the data is flowing. Because one of the really cool things about being at Medco was we had the claim data across everything that went on. We were identifying contraindication. We had the genome on 7 million people. So when warfarin Coumadin issues were coming up, the red flag was going up, we wouldn't let anybody distribute it because that person will bleed out. And so it becomes a matter of, do you understand all the way through the system as you create whatever idea it is, think through the next step and the next step and the next step. Don't try to answer all of them yourself. You don't need to. Just know that they're there.